Dobrý večer z KRUHu. Zdravím vás při další akci, tentokrát květnové. A je to akce týkající se cyklu Dialogy a tentokrát přijal pozvání švýcarský teoretik z ETH Curych Philipa Ursprung a výtvarná konceptuální umělkyně Karin Sander z Německa. Oba vyučují na ETH Curych, odkud se s námi i živě spojí. Jejich společnou prezentací pokračuje letošní cyklus Dialogy, kdy si 7 významných osobností, kteří již v KRUHu vystoupili, vybírají k sobě do diskuze jinou osobnost z různých oborů, tedy nejen architekty, ale i vědce, umělce, teoretiky a jiné osobnosti. Dnešní večer se bude věnovat propojování architektury a výtvarného umění a výuce architektury na školách. Na závěr večera budete mít možnost přes aplikaci Slido klást na naše hosty své dotazy. Děkujeme vám za zakoupení virtuálních vstupenek na dnešní večer, kteří podpoří tuto činnost našeho spolku. Vážíme se vaší podpory i vašeho zájmu. Dnes měla původně v dialogu s Philipem Ursprungem vystoupit Anne Lacaton z Francie, ale z důvodu trvajících omezení jsme tento večer přesunuli na jaro v roce 2022 a v dnešním večeru se budeme věnovat propojování umění a architektury. Philip Ursprung, profesor dějin umění a architektury na ETH Curych, vedl mezi lety 2017 a 2019 na této prestižní švýcarské škole Ústav architektury. V KRUHu vystoupil v roce 2014 ve velkém sále kina Světozor v rámci cyklu Švýcarsko-české inspirace. Jeho přednáška se jmenovala Stavěné obrazy Herzog de Meuron a navázala na výstavu z roku 2002, kterou této dvojici uspořádal. Rozhovor s Philipem, stejně jako přepis této přednášky, najdete v jedné z našich publikací, které pravidelně vydáváme. Kromě ETH Curych Philip Ursprung vyučoval na Hochschule der Künste v Berlíně, na Columbia University v New Yorku a na Ústavu architektury v Barceloně. K dnešnímu dialogu si Philip přizval německou konceptuální umělkyni Karin Sander, která je od roku 2007 profesorkou základních principů designu, umění a architektury na ETH Curych a je odpovědná za umělecké vzdělávání studentů architektury. Ve svých dílech analyzuje stávající situace a zabývá se jejich historickým kontextem. Dnešní online spojení bude tak i propojením ETH Curych a Prahy. Přednáška bude v angličtině bez tlumočení. Oběma moc děkuji, jak za KRUH, tak i za vás, posluchače a příznivce architektury. Za realizaci této přednášky děkuji všem z týmů KRUHu, hlavně Anežce Chalupové, prostoru Kemp a všem našim partnerům a institucím, jejichž loga vidíte na svých obrazovkách. Někteří jsou známi již přes 20 let, někteří jsou našimi hlavními partnery již více než 5 let. Společně s nimi věříme smyslu kruhové osvěty a patří jim náš dík. Aktuality o činnosti spolku KRUH můžete sledovat na našem webu nebo na sociálních sítích. Činnost spolku KRUH si můžete připomenout také koupí našich publikací s rozhovory a přednáškami o současné progresivní architektuře od autorů, kteří do Prahy v minulosti zavítali. Najdete zde jak přednášku a rozhovor s Philipem Ursprungem, tak třeba i přednášku a rozhovor s Anne Lacaton, čerstvou držitelkou Pritzkerovy ceny za architekturu. Můžete se je objednat i online prostřednictvím online knihkupců. Dalším dialogem bude za měsíc diskuze indické architektky Annapurny Kundo se specialistou na klimatické změny profesorem Eike Roswag-Klingem z Německa. Dialog proběhne naživo v Praze a doufáme, že alespoň část návštěvníků bude moci sledovat akci společně s námi v sále. A nyní si pustíme krátká videa našich hlavních partnerů, firmy Forbo, MMCT, Somfy a MAT, kterým stejně jako ostatním, včetně veřejných institucí, děkujeme za dlouhodobou podporu.
Since more than 100 years, we have been making floor coverings for our everyday life, exploring innovation, and looking to create better environments. We have been inspired by what is all around us, and we are convinced that our best engineer is nature. With its help, we have created Marmoleum. a unique linoleum floor covering made of natural raw materials. By learning to work with our planet and its organic cycles, Forbo Flooring Systems is able to make one of the most sustainable products. Made from natural raw material such as linseed oil, wood flour, limestone, resin, and jute. With the women and men supplying our raw materials, we are committed to work with respect. Using resources from nature while letting it regenerate. With Marmoleum, we are proud to make durable flooring, truly CO2 neutral, from the origins to the final product, without buying carbon credits. By working with our ecosystems, we create better environments. Today we have a choice. Produce better, to live better. Let nature come inside. Good for people, for buildings, and for our planet. Marmoleum, provided by nature, made truly CO2 neutral. Forbo Flooring Systems.
A nyní předávám slovo do ETH Curych, kde se s námi spojí Philipa Ursprung a Karin Sander. Hello, Philip. Hello, Karin.
Hi.
Nice to meet you again at our virtual hall. And it's your turn, and thanks that you accepted the invitation for this virtual lecture, and we are really glad that you are part of our cycle. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much for the invitation. We are very honored and pleased to join your series with a lecture. Karin Sander and me, we are in the office of Karin Sander at the ETH Curych. It's a very, very long wooden table. And we will start with a short presentation of a little manifesto that we wrote, because we are both excited about the topic of teaching art to architects. So first will be the manifesto, and after that we will start a dialogue, and then we will also hope to have some occasion to discuss with you. With us in the room is Eva and Nicolas. They are assisting us. The camera can move. It has a life of its own. And sometimes you might see that the camera is a little bit bored with what you say. And then the camera starts to walk and show you the room and show you details. This is just to make you feel almost a little bit at home in Zurich. And we would very much also wish to be again in Prague as soon as possible. So I'm starting with the manifesto with the next slide, please. Teaching art to architects, a manifesto. Art and architecture have drifted apart. Architecture education is contributing to the alienation between art and architecture. The mainstream of architecture school is drawn towards technology. Architecture schools run after digitalization, sustainability, and planning. But architecture is not here to serve. It is here to change the world. It is time to reconnect architecture with art and bring theory, politics, and beauty into the curriculum. The next slide, please. During the Corona crisis, we had very strict rules. We were, of course, not allowed to teach on site. We had to keep social distance. We had to stay in home office. Therefore, we decided that we would do as much as possible outdoor to protect the students and staff and prevent the disease from spreading. This is a tour we made to the Jura. The next, please. Strict rule, single tent only. No different people in one room, no indoor teaching, everything outdoors walking. It was very cold, about 0 degrees at night. So everybody was sick afterwards, but we did not spread the disease. Next, please. The seminar as well, we decided we go outside, we meet different places. We take the opportunity to travel with the students to places which are very near Zurich, but we had never looked at. This is a grotto of a famous healer, a couple of kilometers outside Zurich. Next, please. Everything outside and always everything online. So all those students and faculty who were in quarantine or could not come to campus were always with us online. So you see everybody has a laptop or a phone on the knees. And even in snow, this worked. Next, please. Yeah, we were not allowed to be in direct contact with the students in spring. So we decided we're going to use the tool of the megaphone. It is a little bit old-fashioned, but it's also a nice tool because it reminds one of the demonstrations of the reforms, and it has something very special to it, a little bit like a musical instrument. Next, please. So to keep the distance, the students were on this little boat in groups of 3, and they drove with the captain in front of the coast where the teachers were teaching them with the megaphone. Next, please. Also, the students took the megaphone. So this spring and this summer, we meet at different places, always in front of an artwork in public space, like here, the house of Peter Fischli and David Weiss, a famous work from the 1980s, which is now installed in Zurich. Next, please. Or this, another artwork by the artist Olivier Mosset in front of the school building by Christian Keretz, another architect and professor at ETH. Next, please. And here we have crits with the famous writer Elisabeth Bronfen. She was very cold, so all the students gave her a part of their clothes. Perhaps this was not so good to keep the disease from spreading, but sometimes we did not think of that. It was also a very cold morning when we did these crits. Next, please. The students in my class, because I'm teaching theory, they were not asked to design projects. They were asked to write stories, to read and write and invent their own stories. So this is one of the results of one of the students, and actually also very typical for this ambivalent situation, also this depression, but also for some a moment of new creation where he said, let's just stay in bed and get strong for what will come after Corona. So this is my little presentation. And with that, I would hand over to Karin.
Thank you very much. I greet everybody who is here. And we had also this kind of history of Corona, where we decided to stay in bed, really, all Next, of them, please. And stayed really with the computer in bed, so we could talk with each other, but everybody was in bed and surrounded by white pillows. So please do the next. But I go a little bit backwards to architecture. Why does architecture need art? And please, the next slide. First, when I wait is art. Just one back. Okay. I was first when I came here to ETH. It was, of course, this question, art, to introduce into the teaching of to architects. And the first thing was to find the real name for what we do. It is not foundation classes. It is art. It is as wide and broad as possible. It covers everything that is in relation to it. And and the question is, what is my role as an artist teaching art to future architects? So the next, the answer is actually quite easy, quite simple, because architecture shapes our living world, our analog spaces and worlds in which we are always already there. In a real elementary way. That is why it is important precisely in its seemingly self-evident structure that it forms our surroundings, our perception and sensitivities, our feelings, unser Bewegungsraum, for our space of movement, for ourselves within the space. So seen in this way, architecture is always an aesthetic phenomena. It has a fundamental central quality. It is perceived this is the distinguished it, for example, from, let's say, a computer chip or an underground pipe of water whatsoever. And in this respect, as a cultural artifact, architecture has a natural relationship to art, as it were, and it is no coincidence that concepts and such as beauty and ugliness play an important role in architecture. And in the history of architecture, it means architecture, unlike the chip, is never pure functionality, but it is always also functionality. And that is precisely what art is not. Art eludes functional logistics and can therefore do something that architecture alone cannot do. Transcend a given reality, for example, show that this reality could also be another. If you look at it differently or change it even in a very small or very minimally, where art and architecture come together, in this sense, it becomes particularly interesting for me. And that's why I brought two works to show. One where this is important, architecture and art, where there is a relation. And please put the next slide on. Learning and teaching has first to do with a view, that you broaden your view, and therefore this image of Caspar David Friedrich is always for me a very important image to think of. And so this was also a kind of in my mind when I perceived this work. Please, the next image, which is an elevator to give the students a really wide angle overview when they start studying. Please, the next slide. You see here this little glass tower. It is as if it's a freight elevator, and it goes through the whole building and cuts through the roof and goes into the sky. And this is a freight elevator is a very important tool when students start to study, and they can use it. It's fully equipped with technique. There can be videos, colors, lights in the exhibitions, and you can just send them up high up so they can be seen from the city everywhere. It is a work. It's called Transcendence Elevator, and it is realized in 2017 in Linz, in part of the art university there. So the next image. Here you can see how how students get in their material, and it's of course has a long history of freight elevators that bring in the pure material, and artworks will be delivered out. So next slide, please. And when you go up, you have this incredible view all over the city. The next slide. You can see how the lights can be sent up, or where the students can work with, but it works as a normal freight elevator going through all the stories underneath. Next, please. Another work that has to do with the architecture and where art and architecture intermingle somehow is the core drillings. In the NBK in Berlin, holes were drilled through the ceiling or through the floor of the NBK, Neuer Berliner Kunstverein, through the ceiling, just where all the waste baskets were before. So next, please. And during the course of the exhibition, the waste paper fell through the ceiling into the exhibition space and piled up there. Next, please. So it became bigger, and one could really see like little portraits underneath these holes with a paper, which hole this was. Is this a director, or is this the library, or is this, so each of these piles became somehow a kind of portrait and reflect upon the situation of this Kunstverein. You could see up through the holes to the offices, and you could also, the people upstairs working could see down to the exhibition space. So it had a kind of a referential connection between the two stories. The next, please. Yeah, in both works, my artistic intervention reveals what architecture also is: a container for social practices, such as working, talking, being together, fetching, retrieving, collecting, carrying, bringing, etc. Next slide, please. Through the work, art and architecture enter into a reciprocal relationship of reference. And this is exactly what matters to be in teaching as well. Students should learn what their subject matter, also, and also beyond definitions and explanations, because they should learn all the possibilities it contains, object contains, and so on. If architecture consists in the creation of real spaces, the referential connection between art and architecture allows the creation of possible spaces that are in and around the real spaces. And what you see here is how the students are using paper, drawing at each other. And the next, please. Here, here is an interaction with dog owners to hear what they tell you, the social situation, but also to how to get that on paper, how you would work with such ideas, history, and so on. So the next one, please. Outside, we made seminar weeks in Berlin, is this one, and we got a tour through the city by a homeless person who showed us how a homeless person can survive in such a city. And for example, benches out of wood where concrete is underneath, they would die in the winter because the cold comes up. So they know exactly how to manage and how to use the city's equipment. And in this case here, they are in front of a sculpture, and the person just explains that they are drying their, after washing their clothes, they can put the clothes there, they dry much faster there because this is metal, and the metal gets warm in the sun, and so the clothes are much faster drying. Teaching, I have a kind of principles of teaching, which is a kind of mediation, and which means hosting porosity, I would say, and holes, having flat hierarchies. What has it been in the last few years? How social questions have arisen and changed? Aspiration, social levels, basic principles, hosting, supporting personal responsibilities, watching also generational gaps in a way. And the teaching goes always beyond perspective drawing, beyond convention, beyond pure education, beyond expectations to overcome decisions where you don't know where they come from. And I'm here a teacher as an artist. I'm like a free radical in the system. My own attitude, my own work is the provocation in a way, like what I showed. And by all means, teaching is best communicated, I think, in the authority of the teaching, of the teacher, and in his authenticity as a person. So my concept here is to invite also other artists as artists who are involved in their own active work, in their own question, in their kind of searching in their fields, and representing this in their teaching methods. So what does a student need for studying with us? He needs good pencils, paper, books, space, and good food. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
We can go to the next image and yeah.
So this was our presentation, and we come back to the manifesto, Teaching Art to Architects. This is what we had proposed as a contribution to your lecture series. The camera of Eva Ruoff now shows Karin and me. These are little works of art by Karin Sander, and they perhaps they could lead to the first question. I am going to ask Karin some questions, and Karin is going to ask me some questions. This is how we think teaching works. It's about mutual questions. And if it is possible, or you're also welcome, of course, to ask questions via the chat that can be posed to the two of us then. So the camera sees these little figures. It will now see a little office, which happens to be my office. It's 2 floors down.
It's a 3D scan of the volume and of the space inside.
So Nicolas Rolle, who is with us, he made this model, this scan. And of course, this leads to the question, which our school, and I think most schools are now constantly discussing: how do we equip the architecture students to cope with this big change, namely the digital? Do we need more computers, more robots, more lectures? Karin, you have been working on the digital since a while. What is your approach?
Yeah, I think that we are all using this in a total normal way. And of course, we introduced this kind of 3D modeling here that to make maquette has a long tradition of how to do it, and cutting boards and so in an analog way, and they still do it. And of course, there are very interesting new technologies to use. For example, you don't paint a facade with aquarelle or you scan the facade the way you want it. You can enlarge it and you can, in a kind of 3D Photoshop, in a kind of applying structures on facades, you can today make easily maquettes in a much more economical way and in a much more interesting way in changing it. I think it has always to be part of the education and part of the school. And the school here, for example, here we have a whole complex of building with new technology. And as the architects, the young architects, of course, it is, they are tempted to use it, and the artists are also tempted to use it, and it mingles into each other, and they use both ways to develop that to develop it further. There has to be a tool, and then the school has to provide it, and some will go ahead with it, and some will stay with analog structures. It is like a writer. There are writers, they use the computer to write their novel, and others are just needing a pencil on a piece of paper. I like very much both. And to go both ways, both are different kinds of thinking.
So some people say that art and architecture have blurred, that there is hardly a boundary between those, that they merge. What do you think? Is art and architecture almost the same, or is it very different?
I think that both adopted quite a kind of form from each other. For example, that these techniques where you can make sculptures and algorithms, and so you can very quickly come to three-dimensional forms that very much remind me of art historical sculptures, but in this case they are made digitally and they are built digitally also with machines and printing systems and so on. But the artists do the same way. They take these new technologies, using it for their conceptual purpose. And the question is, where is this something that will completely melt into each other? Will the borders be completely open, or is it that it's just a bridge towards something else? And I think that would be the answer. It is, as technique always is, it is just a tool, but the most important is the concept that you follow by. So
you have established in the last couple of years a very specific way of teaching, as you mentioned in your introduction, not teaching the students merely ways of representation, such as perspectival drawing, such as studies in colors and structures. So leaving behind, let's say, the tradition of art education in architecture schools. Now, we are in a situation where the importance of art is questioned by many architects. Architects tend to think it's included in design anyway. We don't need specific artists to teach us that. On the other hand, we say, and I agree, we need art as part of the education of architecture. But probably we don't need architecture as part of the education of artists. And how can one explain that?
I think they think that because they haven't studied with me, the ones who are thinking this. I mean, because that means that they have not quite seen the difference. And there's a big difference between both. And I really accept both parts. But it is, it's too quickly to say, I can do that too. And it's mostly an adaptation of something, but it's not the thing in between. It's not the real. It is something, of course, a colored facade is a beautiful facade, but it is not, has nothing to do with an artistic concept. And the reason why it is very important to continue this part is the architects are here anyway, and they can be work on their concepts in a very broad way, and they do it in an incredibly high level. This is really important. But what we do is something completely different. It is not about it is not a cut between. It's not about the one or the other. It is just what is in between. It is the cut that is interesting. It is just we are not here to simulate art. It's not about to make something look nice. It is the pure how to think further, how to go across borders. I think that art gives a kind of tool that can never be achieved by anything else. I'm completely convinced. And that's why, for example, huge companies invite an artist to be part of their structure because they see that the business just gets another focus when something comes in who has a different approach. And this is also a kind of way. It's a tool of, if you try to go this way, you will never reach. It's much better to go take a detour, and then you know what to do. It's maybe a little bit unclear, but I will get more clear while we talk.
Yeah, because the one critique could be, yes, this is a part of teaching, but the students will probably not become artists.
Yeah.
They should become architects.
Maybe some will.
Maybe some
will not. Yeah.
So do you think they will become better architects after studying art? Or just not so good artists?
I hope not. Yeah, well, it is, I mean, we know in education, just in general, that if you learn, for example, an instrument and learn music, we will all not become musicians, but we learn a lot of the structure. And this is what I mean with a detour. If you learn something else, you can do something where you would like to go much better because you have this other view on it. And so an education has to be as broad as possible with many different kinds of lines to draw. And I think it is important. I mean, when I came here, the idea of the artist would be that you just teach the artist how to do perspective drawings. But doing is, they can all do it. They come from school. This is not about it. It's not about a technique, but if you can do it, you go beyond. And my strategy is going beyond, where you want to go somewhere, but you go beyond. And then what you really wanted to do is not important, but you get an overview from other perspective to question what you are doing. So that leads, of course, to something. If I teach the students to question what we do, they of course, all of a sudden, they wouldn't come anymore. So we have to go one further step in this case also. And after after they have been here, they have learned why. Mm-hmm. And so I like the structure here at ETH very much, that the first year, it's really your duty to stick with it. So you have art, construction, and design. And these three belong to each other in a way, and they each add something. Mm-hmm.
Now, your method is, as you say, very broad. You're also very diverse. You are the professor, so you have the choice, the freedom of designing your teaching, your research, but you have a big group. Mm-hmm. And many are already established artists with their own career. Mm-hmm. Does this allow you a coherent method, or is this in a way just a group of different artists who then all do their method?
Yeah, the idea is to be like a real flower bouquet, so they can pick different kinds of media. For example, film and theory, art history is your part. This is also part of the school here, which is also a very important part of. In this kind of group of people, the artists, they are video artists, stage people, painters, all media you can think of at the moment, who are working in completely different field as artists. And this is good to show so that the students can choose. For example, they would like to make a more depth inside in a step inside photography, for example. And so that's the tool, but then from there, it's not only photography, but it's a starting point. Mm-hmm. It is always very important for the students when they come that they know. You cannot just ask, do you have a question? They don't know when there's a problem. They don't have any question at the beginning. So you give them a kind of platform where the questions arise. And from there, they can translate this in different media. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's, of course, a fantastic didactic approach, to allow these questions to rise, or to create opportunities and conditions where questions flourish. Yeah, and questions are like gold worth, for teaching, yes, and for thinking also. So they are what we try to encourage the students to develop and have, and sometimes also answer. Huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For example, in your case, the art history is a very important part for the architecture students as well, because they would never be able to do their own projects if they are not taught what has been done before, with all the different kinds of reasons.
Yeah, we try to help them in being also intellectuals, and being architects that, of course, know how to draw, have certain skills, but also being, citizens, able to discuss, able to develop further the discipline, the field of architecture, mm-hmm. Question where it stands, mm-hmm. and figure out where it could go. Mm-hmm. So the knowledge of history is not so much an accumulation of data, mm-hmm. and knowledge. Of course, it's good if you have some idea of what has happened, but it's also a way to make one alert to the burning questions, mm-hmm, and mm-hmm. to be able to distinguish what is important and what is perhaps less important. Mm-hmm. And for that, going back in history or going around in your contemporary field is a good training. Architecture is also kind of a dialogue, you know, between different positions, and it's amazing that to some extent even a first-year student can communicate with a building like the Acropolis or the Hagia Sophia, and communicate and even develop it further. It's as if these buildings were never really finished. They're part of an endless series and stories of possible designs. And this is the way it could have happened. It could have happened that way. And this mixture of what's real, what's possible, is something which you can study in history, because it's an almost endless reservoir field of possibilities. And we try to make them less fearful to approach history, not being something which you have to learn by heart because you will fail, but as a field which is at their disposal if they wish, which they can access in order to find partners in thinking.
Also to observe exactly these parts, which they would normally not be aware of.
Yeah, learning is also by imitation. No? Like your scanner is imitating our bodies and our clothes. So the scanner kind of learns what's there, and the students and also teachers learn by copying, by imitating. And history is also offers a lot of issues which you can kind of copy. And some you might develop further, others you don't want to have, and you just leave them. But it's again, it's a lot of possibilities for learning and also for learning yourself once you're out of school.
Yeah, it's you copy things. It's very interesting to watch the students while they're copying, or while they still orientate themselves at what they know, and then all of a sudden they come with their own handwriting. And this is such a step, and this is so amazing when they come to that point where you can see they have a foundation built on top of, and then they make their own pirouette.
Yeah, we're doing this now in our teaching experiment, where we work with them on writing and reading. So they start first by reading a lot, but then they soon develop their own stories. And at the moment that starts, we kind of also as teachers, we are obliged to follow them, because they set the rules. They tell us how it works. And this is a very exciting moment. So now you see that the camera is a little bit blurred. Perhaps the camera will tell us it's time to go back to Prague and take questions. What about our time?
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So, we can ask audience if they do have any questions on you. We can also start to discuss, because to my mind it came that some part of students, they told me they wanted to study architecture because they wanted to have multifunctional field somehow. So already at the beginning there is a need to do more, how to say it, not only to study mathematics, but you have to study mathematics to study architecture somehow, so you connect more fields in architecture. So I like your approach that you connect the studying with the art. a lot. And I wanted to ask, and I skip for 2 sentences to check. Máte možnost se ptát přes aplikaci Slido. Pište nám dotazy v češtině nebo v angličtině a my je předložíme tady našim přednášejícím. So they can send me messages to applications and I will read it to you. I wanted to ask how teachers are chosen for teaching at ETH Curych. Like, is the diversity of teachers the goal, or is there any specific role of the dean also? Because you was a dean for 2 years, Philip.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Could you describe it a little bit? How is it? How you can choose as a dean teachers, or is there any advice, parliament or something?
Yes, thank you. So the hiring of professors is done by the president of the school, president of ETH. So this person is in the end alone responsible and can decide alone. Every faculty, like the architecture school, can compose a committee of professors, not just from the architecture school, but from other departments and from international schools, and also from students and from teaching staff. So it's a big committee between sometimes 8, 10, can be 12 people, and they propose candidates to the president, usually 1 or 2, which they select. The criteria are, first of all, in the field. If we're looking for a professor of architecture and art, we expect that mostly artists will apply. If we look for an art historian, we look for art historians. We might look at the specialization. Is it somebody more in heritage? Is it somebody more in technology? So this is the profile. And then the criteria is this vague criteria of the excellency. Is it a person that has proven that she or he can further the field, question its limits, bring something which hasn't been there before? This, of course, is a very vague and subjective criteria, which means that often in these committees, there is long discussions. What is the best person? So diversity is one of the factors. You don't want to have all the teachers that do the same. So, for instance, we are very glad that we have now professors from different nationalities, where we don't look at the passport. And we also have different styles. Some are more oriented towards the technology, some are perhaps more oriented towards the social, like Anne Lacaton. But they're all in the field of design, all overlapped by the fact that they are practitioners that have an office, that have realized projects, so that they play a role in the practice of architecture. This is kind of the internal rule that the architecture school has. So that's one of the criteria. Of course, also a criterion that is discussed and sometimes questioned. Is it fair to look at what someone has done? Because this means we exclude professors who might do something. And this makes us, I think, a very strong school with many very strong colleagues, but also not always the most experimental school. Because, of course, we ask for a certain experience, meaning that we have little space for very young emerging talents. And this might make the school as a whole, let's say, more conservative than other schools. But this is kind of the credo that we are currently using, and this is constantly negotiated and discussed among the professors. Also also with the participation of the students and the teaching staff. And so far, I think we're quite confident that we have a good mixture in teachers.
Thanks a lot. And question to Karin. I wanted to ask you, is your subject like they can choose, students can choose your subject, or do they have to do it obligatory? Like at the first grade or the second grade or something?
Yeah. The first year in ETH is that they have, it's obligatory, that they have to go through this, and this is structured in the first year that they have a certain technique class where they learn certain techniques. Then they have a kind of lecture which is presenting certain questions in contemporary art that are discussed at the moment. And then they have in the main part of 6 hours that day, they go to the practical part where they can experience themselves certain media, certain questions, certain projects they develop all over the year, their own project. And then after the first year, there are elective classes. We had 6 to 7 elective classes where they could continue. And this is, they can ask for and apply for, and there are coming more than in the first year. We cannot take them all, but we have to restrict because of in the system of the time and so on. And then we are also part of the master, where we support the student at his last presentation, his last master work. Yeah, that's how the artistic structure is part of this system at ETH.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. I have 2 questions from Imro Vaško. He is a professor at Applied Arts in Prague. He's from Slovakia. Please explain me more. What do you mean in your third and fourth manifesto points, drone technology and digitalization? Is it good or bad in your manifesto?
We think it is a stereotype. Mm-hmm. We think it is a word without much content. It's what everybody wants to hear, but it also prevents perhaps the more exciting questions. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's bad. Yeah.
Okay. For example, I don't know if it's true just now, but I heard that at ETH, every student at the final presentation has to have 3D visualization of the building. It can be drawn by the hand, but it has to be done by computer. Is it true?
No.
Okay.
But I haven't seen many by hand, that's true, but it's not a rule. No, we don't have rules for the present.
Yeah. Okay. And this is very important, not to have rules at the final thesis. And we expect that everybody had found his own handwriting. I mean it on another level, how to present the idea, and it has to be appropriate to the idea that the student is presenting. Mm-hmm.
So another question from audience. Also, the ambition, change the world, might be understood as disturbing for many of intellectuals because nowadays world has so many urgent problems.
Oh, can you repeat the question?
Once more. I don't understand it too. Also, the ambition, change the world, might be understood as disturbing for many of intellectuals because nowadays world has so many urgent problems and points.
The world, yes.
The world.
Yes. Of course, a manifesto is also a provocation. And of course, we cannot change the world entirely. We mean that it's good, especially for young students, to not give up their idea that what they will do will change everything and will have a good impact. Mm-hmm. So change the world, you can say it's a plea for remaining confident to utopia and remaining optimistic and positive.
Yeah. And take responsibility while studying for the questions that will arise during in terms of the world to change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be nice if architects could change the world, actually. I wanted
to try.
Yeah. Karin, I wanted to ask you, I know if it's not measurable, but can you be more like concrete or to explain how it can help students to develop their way in architecture, your course, for example, your teaching of art? If you have some examples.
Yeah, for example, students come and start studying, and then they have a certain image of what, for example, drawing might be. They want to learn to draw like Le Corbusier, for example. And this has to be questions because why? Why? And what we do is then to if it works in a good way, or this is at least our aim, that they learn how to draw, how they draw. So compared to people, the students know how to write, they know the letters they can write, but they don't know what to write. And so we help them to find their way of text, their way of writing, their way of expression, and maybe at the end, it comes out something completely different. Studying means to find out who you are and to reflect upon yourself, and that might do that you question even what you are doing now. Even, is this the right place to be? Is this the right school? Is this the right field? And only then, with this, it's not taking the pen and drawing realistically. It's beyond. It means it asks questions about each person itself, and this is what this leads to. This is concrete what we are looking for, to help the students to reflect upon their own expectation.
And did you have in your career...
Not fulfilling tasks. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you if you had any example of the student of architecture that he or she turned to be artist more than architect?
Not just, that could happen also. This I know also of a few, but basically we start with 350 students each year, 320, something like this. And then in the first couple of months, 40 will leave for different reasons. And one discovers music, one discovers, and this is a concrete example. For example, one student was once asked to help out in a studio for noises. When you give a reading, then you have a thunderstorm in the back, and you have this and this. So he left to help out there, and he got a little job, And by now, he is the head of this music studio. He really discovered while studying something completely different, and we supported that. Because it also, it is the study from, I think studying means to find out where is your place in the world. And this is not just fulfilling tasks that are given by us as professors. This is the examination you have to give in this and this and this. Yes, that's one part, but much more important is to go around it, to question it, and to find out what your answer is on it.
Thanks a lot. We have another question. Is there any difference in teaching art to architecture students to, for example, students of art or of art history? Thank you. Maybe for Philip or both of you?
Yes.
Both of you.
Yes. I have taught often art history to artists and also to art historians. And I like very much to teach art history to architecture students because they have a way in making productive everything almost immediately, as if it's a mentality which is very constructive. You are trained to, I think, to change the world and build it up almost every day. And this means that you can approach very different issues, topics, questions, problems, and then deal with it in a often playful way. So I learn actually a lot from teaching art history to architecture students because they come out with questions that I didn't expect. For them, it's something which they can work with. So it helps me also in my dealing with the matter. Yeah, so it is a difference. Yeah, it's also the difference of culture and the difference of training, which is perhaps because of the friction also, and sometimes the little misunderstanding, but also there's no wrong, too much respect for what you expect, and that I find useful. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want to miss it. Yeah.
Thanks. What about you, Karin? Do you have any?
I first was very astonished that the architects always follow what you say. And in the art academy, you are more presented with people who just do the opposite that you say. And but I think the education at the architect school is you have a much broader education of many different fields, and this is why I think it should stay like this, that you have art history, you have a lot of different kind of lectures and all these other also very practical classes, for example, mathematics and so on. And as I said before, I like very much that you turn to different problems to solve the one you want to solve.
Okay, thanks a lot. And maybe my last question is, because in psychology there is a special way, last 10 years, that they are more oriented for positive, something like happiness in psychology. And also your manifesto is positive one, I would say, and also is connected with beauty, as you said at the beginning. Do you think is it like nowadays question to be more to find more positive stuffs, not to be so rational, only what the brain does and so on? Or do you think is there any specific time for this thinking about beauty and happiness and so on?
I would think that to study and to to find out what you really want to do, and to enjoy that freedom that you have while studying. It's the most happy situation you can get, and this is to continue when you have found what you want to do. Is the other part of fulfillment, and it satisfies you instead of being squeezed in something you have to do, you must do. And this is what I support the students also, to find the way that you really want to do, and then it satisfies it in that regards, that happiness is going with it. Of course, there are strategies all along that belongs to it also, but in general, I would think like that.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I agree. Education is probably by nature optimistic. Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is forward-looking. It's about the future. It's about creating possibilities, about enabling, and about doing something together. So optimism is certainly the tone that we are surrounded with, and that we also want to give to the students. Mm. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And also images you've shown at the beginning, how you try to solve the situation with distances and so on. I would say it could be also a very nice experience for students that they will remember this year with you, actually. So it was really nice to see it. So we don't have any more questions. I don't know if you have any other topics you want to open, or maybe next time. So thanks a lot for your time, your nice dialogue between you and your nice sculptures at your office. And we are really glad that we could connect online with you. So thanks for your time and for your approach. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Děkujeme vám za pozornost a budeme se těšit opět v červnu, kdy vystoupí Annapurna Kundo, indická architektka, a budeme řešit klimatické změny a architekturu. Těšíme se na vás.